And we're here with another episode of Entering the Sports World. I am here with Darryl Belfry, former skills coach of the Canada's national women's team, where he won a gold and silver medal. He is also a former player consultant for the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Chicago Steel. And he currently is the owner of Darryl Belfry Hockey, where he works with players such as Sidney Crosby, Auston Matthews, Patrick Kane, John Ferris. The list goes on and on. Thank you for coming on, Darryl.
Thanks for having me. Just a little note. I didn't win any gold medals or any medals at all, but I did go there and help them once or twice. So, but the gold medals and the silver medals, that's on the kids. They won it. I didn't do anything.
All right, elite prospects lying to me, I guess. No,
yeah, I didn't win any gold medals.
All right, so we'll jump right into that. What was that like working with the on the national hockey, Canada national hockey level?
Yeah, I was involved with them on formally for one of their camps. Was right in between. They were just getting ready to hire a new coach, and they had a camp, and so I went in and ran the camp. And it was my first time really working with female players at that level, and it was interesting. They're definitely incredibly talented players, and they're really bright, and they learn very fast. So it was really interesting and different experience. So I really enjoyed it.
Do you notice a big difference between the men's and women's game, or?
Well, the way that the women have been modeling a lot of their game, I think in some ways, towards what the men do, but there are some differences for sure. I think that one of the interesting parts is that it's a lot more physical than you might think. You know, it's a really physical game, and they compete incredibly hard.
Yeah, by that you mean like battles in the corners and stuff.
Well, anything along the wall is pretty much free. So there's full-on body contact along the boards, and in front of the net is hotly contested. And then the only thing you wouldn't see necessarily is like a predatory open ice hit. You wouldn't see that there. But all the rest of it, it's very physical. They compete, and it's a physical competition as much as it's a skill competition, which is, I think, underrated with that game. And especially when you get the Canada and the US going, it can get really they're competing hard. So it's pretty fun to watch when they get going.
All right. I also, as I mentioned in the intro, you've worked at the USHL level. What was that like?
Oh, the USHL is great. I mean, there's a lot of players with a ton of like what you would call potential. They're not quite where they want to be, but they're on their way. We're fortunate because we have a ton of talent there, and so we have a great staff that works with the players. So for me, it's great. I can work with the staff to come up with ways in which we can help the players kind of translate their game to be better pros faster. I mean, they still have a step in between as they're going to be going to college and stuff, but it's still nice to be talking to them in that realm about being a pro player and what that's about and the skills that they're going to need and the type of way they're going to want to play to angle their game in that way. So it's good. And they have a very captive audience because they're very motivated to do whatever it takes to get to the next level.
Yeah. So at that age, like you said, they're still going to college. What type of skills are you looking to develop at that point? Is it more you're trying to get the stick handling and skating down, or is it you're trying to make them learn the game more, kind of like proper passes and stuff upon that line?
It's all of it. I mean, they're still young, so they still need to skate better. They still need to handle the puck better. They still need to shoot better. So they're far from finished in their development from an individual skill perspective. And then there's some just getting them to learn to play with each other. I mean, a lot of times when they're coming into the league, they've perhaps been playing minor hockey, and it's easier for them to play one-on-one. And now it's hard to play one-on-one in the USHL. You're going to have to use your teammates. You got to move to space. You got to learn to protect the puck differently. It's different that way. So it's a little bit of a change from being like in minor hockey where you can dominate one-on-one to then being now you got to play with other people much more to be successful. So there's a lot more of that, I would say. The other thing too is you got to teach a lot of bridge skills because some of them are still very young relative to the league, and so they're physically immature. So you have to be working on things that allow them to bridge the physical gaps that they have and yet still be effective in winning physical battles. So sometimes it's a lot of that stuff too.
I didn't even think of that, but how you got to build the muscle into like get the muscle memory going for the drills coming into or skills coming into the future. But also, so do you see, because obviously there's going to be people at different levels because they're still young and bodies grow at a different time. What do you think, are some of the players you have worked with who you just came in, you were just wowed by their skill?
Well, there's a lot like there in Chicago. There's quite a few. We just had this Owen Power for a couple of years. He's an incredible player. Amazing how for a young defenseman to come into a really competitive league. It's a tough league, the USHL. It's very competitive, and he was able to come in and be a really important player pretty quickly. And then just how quickly he developed his skill to become like a really important player. He's one of the best players in the league last year. So he was really impressive. Brendan Brisson this past year was outstanding. He came in and he was a dominant player right from the beginning. Sam Colangelo is up for the draft, and he was an interesting player because he was like physically, he was a big gangly kid and who was kind of just building himself physically. And then all of a sudden you could see him take off, start using his body more effectively to score. The player that we really kind of was really interesting was the Nick Abruzzese kid a couple of years ago. It was interesting. Yeah, physically really immature kid, but mentally not. Very bright, really intelligent player. So kind of learning him having to use his mind and watching him how he used his mind was really fascinating. So those kind of players, there's a lot of them there. Those are just a few.
All right, now moving on to the NHL level, we'll start with some of the Leaf players you worked with in your time with the Leafs. What was that like, just starting with the Leafs? Because you were kind of around the rebuild era, and when they're starting to get some of the younger players like Morgan Rielly and Auston Matthews. And how is that working with some of those guys?
Well, anytime you work with an NHL player, it's a privilege, right? Like they're genuinely experts, and so you learn as much from them as they learn from you, if not more. Like you're really, in a lot of ways, you're the student and they're the teacher. And I think that goes for any NHL player. Like you're talking about the top 700 players in the world. It's you're dealing with people who are at expert level craftsmanship of what it is that they do. And so the biggest takeaway that I have in any time I've spent with NHL players is it's a time really for me for learning, not always a time for me to be teaching.
Yeah. So what type of skills do you kind of stress with the guys, or do you really take pride in helping out and improving their game?
Well, for me, it has nothing to do with my skill set. Like I don't have like a favorite set of skills that are important to me, or I don't have like a shtick that like this is what I'm a specialist in. My thing is I'm more research based, so I watch a lot of tape on the player and to figure out inefficiencies in their game and where they might be able to be better, and then we tackle that. And sometimes it's an individual skill like their skating ability in certain areas, or Sometimes it's the way they handle the puck. Sometimes it's different ways in which they can tactically approach similar situations. So the best part about it is it's very different with every player, and I think that's player development now. It's not, you can't, I don't think you can really be a specialist as much as you once were able to be. I think you have to be more of a research and problem solve with the player. And when I say that the players are the experts, I mean that they are. And so you're collaborating with them more than you're like, hey, I think you should do this. It's your research. Hey, do you realize like you could be more effective here? Here's a couple of ideas, and then, okay, well, that's great. Then you're kind of moving through a relationship to get to where you want to go. So it's a much more collaborative experience working with those players than one might think.
So what made you want to get into becoming somebody who videotapes and reacts and gets the skills taught?
Like for me, there was no, when I started, there was no player development job. That wasn't a job. You had some skating instructors, you had some specialists, but when I was coming through, there really wasn't a job like the one that I have now. It wasn't available. So it wasn't anything that I aspired to do. I just followed kind of what my skill set was, and I tried to just see where I was becoming impactful, and I just followed that, and it just led me into what I do now. I didn't really aspire to do it. I just kind of, one thing led to the next, which led to the next, and all of a sudden here I am. Like it was really one of those types of paths, and it's, in some ways it's like you feel like you're blazing a trail, but in other ways you're like, maybe it's kind of before its time, and so you never really know where you fit kind of in that realm. But I'm excited now that there is more opportunity for people that want to do this type of thing. But when I was going through, there wasn't really a path. Like no one had really done it that way, other than, like I said, that there was a few skating instructors, but nothing like it is now.
Now, what would be your biggest piece of advice for somebody who is trying to follow your footsteps?
The biggest thing is, one, focus on learning to teach. That's number one. You in our business, it's a very personal business. Player development is very personal. You have to develop a relationship with the player, and the player has to trust you, and you need to have excellent ability to teach. So that's number one. And then you have to be an excellent researcher. So you need to be able to read video, clip games, come up with an argument as to why the player should learn, like come up with an argument that illustrates an inefficiency, and then start building a plan to be able to do that. But there's really two problems. Like you need to be an excellent teacher, and you need to know what you're doing when you get on the ice. And every player is going to be different, so you can't really have like one size fits all. So expand your skill base as much as possible. When I did it, I started with kids, and I did a lot of work with kids. And I think that the more time you can spend teaching kids, the better I think you can build a skill set, because every kid is so different. The range of abilities is so big. It really does challenge you to learn how to deal with all of those kids and all those abilities. So I would really encourage anybody to learn those two things and work a ton with kids.
All right, so we're coming down on time. So I'd like to say thank you for coming on. It means a lot to me. Is there anything you want to promote of your own?
No, I appreciate the time being able to come on here and talk to you. It sounds like you're really trying to do something to provide some good information for people about how they might be able to get involved in hockey, and I think that's great what you're doing. So keep it up.
Thank you very much. All right.